So let's get started. Welcome. I would love to maybe let's just start it with some introduction. If you want to tell us a little bit about you, where you want to med school, and where life is taking you in the next few years for residency.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm graduating in a few weeks. I am getting my MD at Harvard, and I'm starting my general psychiatry residency at Mount Sinai in June, in only a month.
Awesome. And that's I feel like right now it's like the perfect time to kind of bring back some memories of when you're applying. Just like, can you tell us a little bit, walk back, walk us back to your journey when you first started med school? How did you land in psychiatry? Was it something that you came into med school thinking about, or was it something you fell in love with doing the med school education? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's definitely not something I thought of. I think when I started medical school, I would have never guessed that I would have become a psychiatrist. I wanted to be an oncologist. I
Hmm.
loved all of my preclinical work. I loved all the physiology that I learned, and then went into the wards, and that's when my fascination for the brain started.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what pivoted me towards like neuroscience related specialties. I was just like inspired by the brain as like the
Hmm.
essence of who we are, and started to think of neurology versus psychiatry. And when I did my psych rotation, I just really loved like being able to spend a lot of time with patients, getting to
Hmm.
know a lot about them, and really like I think psychiatry is the most like holistic is like for me the most holistic of the specialties in terms of like really caring for the whole person.
Hmm.
So being able to kind of like get that like human holistic connection, and then also like neuroscience research and fascination, it was a
Hmm.
no-brainer.
Yeah. So I think we actually featured neurology in the previous panel sessions, and I think that there was some comparing and contrasting, and then people were talking about making that decision because I feel like a lot of people who are interested in the brain and already decided not to go into surgical specialty, then they typically come to this crossroad, right? Psychiatry versus neurology. Um, can you tell us a little bit like how like what didn't draw you to neurology, like for people who are facing the same dilemma, besides the holistic part of treating a patient and understanding their past medical history or their entire life?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one piece of advice that I have, and that's maybe like more broadly, is to journal during your clinical rotations. That's something that I did a lot.
Hmm.
And rereading my journals kind of gave me a lot of insight as to how I made that
Hmm.
decision. Um, when I'm on vacation, I love reading books about the brain. It fascinates me. It always will be, I think, an incredibly exciting topic for me. And then even when I was journaling about like what specifically I was excited about when I was learning about the brain, it was always around like higher order functions, like
Hmm.
emotions, cognition, memory, the sense of self. And then when I had my winter break where I read a ton of books related to that, and then was thrown into my neurology rotation, and kind of like was very shocked because I kind of like felt disconnected from what I was passionate
Hmm.
about. I realized that like I'm maybe less passionate about like movement and the like very like medicine based way of thinking that is like important part of neurology. So when I then did my psych rotation, I realized a lot of the topics about neuroscience that fascinated me were very central to the way that we think in psychiatry.
Hmm.
Um, so that was one piece, and then another piece I think is like in terms of I like to think of psychiatry as a field where we will experience a paradigm shift in our lifetime in terms of how we understand the etiology of mental illness, the
Hmm.
neurophysiology of normal emotions, and how that can develop into pathology. And I
Hmm.
was very excited about novel psychiatric treatments. I was very excited about TMS, interventional psychiatry, ketamine, being able to expand treatment options, and in the process, getting to understand a little bit more what causes some of the mental illnesses that we treat. I was very excited about that. And while I
Hmm.
know that like there's tons of research happening in neurology, I just found myself to be a little bit less drawn to the innovation in neurology. So that was another piece. And then the last piece for me was the lifestyle, which I think is always important to keep in
Hmm.
mind. I found myself to be extremely tired after the neurology weeks. The hours were very long, and it kind of felt more like a medicine type rotation where the rounds were very long, and that just wasn't for me. I like the style of a psychiatry rotation where
Right.
you have more time and you overall end up I think having a work-life balance that fits.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so important. I feel like a lot of times when we're idealistic before coming to med school, thinking about, oh, the grandiose picture of how to save a life and how my life is going to be, like as you progress through med school and then gaining a more adulting life, then you'll realize, oh, work-life balance is actually really important. Like it's not something that you can just like you can power through probably in your like early 20s, have all the energy, have no like, family or kids, but work-life balance is such an important thing. Um,
I just found myself to like I want to go to work when I feel like my life is balanced and I'm excited about
right.
it. And I wake up the next day and I'm looking forward to going and doing what
Hmm.
I like. But I did notice that on the weeks where um, that wasn't the case, and I do
Hmm.
think that unfortunately a lot of medicine still follows that pattern. It was harder for me, so and that was very obvious reading the journals retrospectively.
Hmm.
That's why I recommend journaling. It's such a great like introspective window
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
how you process and I think it gives you a good sense when you retrospectively read through them. It gives you a window into what your mindset was at the time, which is something I think we're not so good at in terms of like getting a sense of how we felt in the past. I think
Hmm.
we humans don't do a very good job remembering that,
Yep.
so it's good to keep those little cues to
Hmm.
remind you.
Yeah, and I think we really need to, especially in medicine, destigmatize like going for a lifestyle. Like there is this unspoken slash ex not explicit, like more implicit, like bias slash disdain for like, oh, people going in for the lifestyle, but you know, we shouldn't punish people or punish people for pursuing what makes them happy. It's life outside of work, and I think that's very important.
Absolutely agree. I think, and
Hmm.
I like that. I made it a point throughout my rotation where like I talk about it very openly. But
Hmm.
again, I think like when thinking about psychiatry, it's it can be a very heavy field. So I think
Hmm.
like that like lifestyle cannot be the only factor.
Exactly.
I think that because it's also very easy to burn out. I think if
Hmm.
you're going into psychiatry just for the lifestyle, there needs to be fascination
Right.
and like a desire to help people with psychiatric illness, which I think is quite different from medical
Hmm.
illness
Hmm.
in terms of like the advocacy that comes with it as well. So I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but I just think it's sad that like in the past we haven't even considered that as a piece of the puzzle in
Right.
decision making of our lives because
Yep.
we kind of like I think live in this like culture where medicine is kind of viewed as like a sole vocation, and we
Hmm.
sometimes forget that it's a job and that our lives are, composed of many different parts, and that is one part of our life that's very fulfilling, very enriching, and that I love to do, and that
Hmm.
I'm excited to do, but that there are other pieces
Hmm.
to life, and that's something that is very apparent in psychiatry interviews.
Right.
Residency interviews in
Exactly.
psychiatry, they love to know what you do outside of work, and that's a green flag for them that you're like
Hmm.
able to cultivate a life for yourself where
Right.
your balance allows you to essentially craft your own wellness
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
feel secure. So I also think that that's a specialty culture.
Yeah. That's awesome to hear. And I think another advice I've gotten to choose a residency or specialty that you're interested in is to get to know the day-to-day, the bread and butter cases, the what is it's not really going for what's the most exciting thing, what's the most Libra
Mhm.
cases. It's whether or not you like the day and day to day. So can you tell us a little bit of, as a psychiatrist, as maybe more so later in life in terms of like a P2I2 maybe, that you're not rotating
Yeah.
through different internal medicine rotations. Like, what is a day to day like for an, I don't know, maybe an academic psychiatrist who's, interested in research, interested in the new directions? Like, what is that like?
I think that's always a hard question because it's actually fascinating how many different paths someone can have in psychiatry. It's such a diverse field.
Hmm.
If you are like a primarily, let's say, like inpatient psychiatrist, then your bread and butter is going to be very different from someone who does, let's say, like outpatient clinic psychotherapy and
Hmm.
med management, versus someone that works in an ECT clinic, where like they do that full time. So, and then there's people that sort of pick and choose from each of these things. Like they do one day of that, one day of that, and then one day in the
Hmm.
emergency room. So like I think that's the big caveat that I will say answering this question is
Hmm.
it is a very diverse field, and that's one of the reasons why I love it. I feel like entering this path, I feel like I have a million options of what I want my life to be,
That's awesome.
and you can really sort of craft whatever schedule you want for yourself. So, for example, in inpatient psych, um, uh, a bread and butter, for example, would be like managing psychosis. That would,
Hmm.
I think, be like bread and butter for inpatient, someone coming in like um, acutely decompensated with like a chronic psychotic illness, for example, or a psychosis secondary to substance use, that's either like coming in voluntarily or involuntarily, and then sort of thinking about like medication, like starting medication or trying to like think about what medication they were on and continuing that, and also like really thinking about like how the pharmacotherapy fits in with the whole social picture as well. Like, how are we
Hmm.
essentially bringing this person back into society in a way that is stable, both from a like pharmacologic perspective, but also working with
Hmm.
our social work colleagues to really come up with a solid social plan as well. So that's like one of the like bread and butter inpatient
Hmm.
psych. Emergency psych, I there is just such a wide variety of things you can get. But yeah, essentially in every one of these fields, you will have a very different day-to-day life. It's actually
Hmm.
striking. I think all specialties to some degree have that, but
Right.
um, I'm more attuned to the psychiatry variety, just 'cause that's what have most exposure to.
Gotcha. And kind of looking back to your application, like you know, your M4 year, M3, M4 years, um, can you tell us a little bit of, psychiatry match? Is there anything that's particularly unique to psychiatry? Is there a particular culture to, apply? You kind of alluded to kind of interviews and the culture in psychiatry is slightly different, but can you tell us a little bit of like all the things you have experienced as compared to some of your peers who are going to different specialties? What are some of the
Yeah.
similarities slash differences?
Yeah. Um, so one thing, for example, is the personal statement is very important in psychiatry. That's something I people really read. I've had interviewers cite my personal statement, ask me follow-up questions about that in a way that
Hmm.
I thought was very insightful and thoughtful. Versus I know like peers in other specialties where the personal statement really is more like a job cover letter, where it doesn't really like serve a huge purpose necessarily, but for psychiatry, I've heard the description. It's like a window into your character. So that's something that's
Hmm.
really important. And I think character in general is something that they look for, um, specifically like throughout your application and then during interviews. And that's like character both like within the workplace and like how that relates to psychiatry, and then what I alluded to outside of the workplace. Really making sure that you are interested in things outside of work and have
Hmm.
that balance. Because I also think that to some degree, I mean, and I don't know how, like that wasn't very like obviously asked. Like that's not something that can be asked. But I think like in asking about like your balance outside of work, that's also a way to like get to know like what your coping skills are in terms of managing stress, and how like
Hmm.
you sort of think about like the design of your life outside of work to make sure that you keep yourself well and have support, because I think that's something that's particularly hard in our field.
Yeah.
Um, and then in terms of research, I don't think psychiatry is one of those fields where there's like a like clear cut, like you need X number of publications, otherwise we won't interview you. Not at all. I really think that like if research fits your like work character and that's what you're very passionate about, then great, and that's something that is going to be valued. But
Hmm.
there are a million ways to build that work character that do not necessarily involve research. And I think that's something that was different from some of my other peers where research was more of a like silent requirement.
Yeah.
Those are some of the similarities and differences.
Gotcha. And you guys go through the same application with most of the specialty, right?
Yeah, same application.
Hmm.
Also overall, in terms of like my like USMD peers in psychiatry, I've kind of like seen people apply to less schools than some of the other more competitive specialties where I've seen people apply
Hmm.
to like kind of 40, 50 schools more. So that's also something else that I've noticed.
Right. And I guess compared to, I feel like a lot of our listeners probably only have their reference points probably applying to med school. How do you feel like
Yeah.
your application process into residency differs from applying to med school?
Honestly, I think the most important, or like in terms of like just time difference for me, was there are no secondaries.
Oh
And
my
it
God.
is huge.
Shoot.
It is huge. You just send one application to however
Uh-huh.
many programs you want, and that's it. And then you hear back from for interviews, and then you interview there, and then you send your ranking, and then you match.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's I thought it's a lot simpler. It took me a lot less time than applying to medical school. It was
Hmm.
much cheaper also.
Yeah.
So I would say it was a much more streamlined and simple process than applying to medical school,
Hmm.
especially applying to medical school as an international student. This felt like a little bit more streamlined.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you're talking about like applying as an international students. And I know that now when you are going to residency, it's a entirely different, I think now you're considered working. So there are a lot of the questions that we get when people
Mhm,
are applying to residency is visas, right? That's a
mhm.
very tricky situation to navigate. So can you tell us a little bit of your decision on like encountering H-1B versus J-1s or like talking to program directors about whether or not they sponsor? How was that
Mhm.
experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, I will start with a disclaimer that I think it's very unfortunate that we have to go through all of this mental work.
Hmm.
And I want to like validate that like there are times when it's hard that like we are going through that and we'll see all of our like domestic peers that are not going through that. So that's the first thing I want to start the answer with. In terms
Hmm.
of like the steps, the first step is like thinking about your program lists, and making a decision of whether or not you're open to J1 or H1B. For me, it
Right.
was very clear. I really wanted an H1B. Um, my home country, Lebanon, is kind of like politically unstable. So I didn't want like a visa where there was any option that I would have to go back, even if it was
Hmm.
for 2 years. So
Yeah.
I wanted something that felt more stable. So I decided that it would be H1B or nothing for me, essentially. And there's a place in the application process where you can choose which visa you want to be considered for, and you can only take H1B or take both, or only
Hmm.
J1. So that will determine your program list. Um, in terms of figuring out which programs sponsor H1B and J1, some of them it's very clear cut. Like you'll see it, it's going to be written in the website very clearly. And then others, it's a little bit more of a gray area. Residency Explorer was a good tool for me.
Hmm.
Freda is another good tool. Those are like two similar to MSAR for medical
Yeah.
school, where you can like search and um, they have conflicting information sometimes, or like they'll say one program sponsor and then the other one it's so there you will encounter some ambiguity. I've heard mixed tips on whether or not to reach out to programs
Yeah.
beforehand to ask them. I would recommend reaching out. I think visa sponsorship is incredibly important. I
Hmm.
think it's a proxy for support and how much a
Yep,
program is willing to
I agree.
support you.
Hmm.
Um, and the way that I really looked at it was, well, if I send an email to a program director about my visa sponsorship, which is my work stability, and they either dismiss it or they're not able to support me, or me asking for it reduces my chances, that's not necessarily going to be a good fit for me. And that's not a program that I think I would anticipate would support me. So that's
Hmm.
also how I kind of like thought about the question. So with that in mind, I was very forthcoming about asking about it, not being the first thing you ask on interview day, but like after interview day, like sending an email to the coordinator and asking them or just confirming like, hey, like I'm really interested in an H1B. I loved your program. Is that something that you'd be willing to
Hmm.
consider? And then you can kind of get a better sense, given, especially for the ones where it's a little bit more ambiguous, that you'll get a clearer answer.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a good process to even just screen out programs that are not even open to accommodate. Or if that reduces your chance of getting into that residency program, then it it serves us, I think, to like screen out programs. Um,
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
honestly, like just it's. I think for me, it's also a value of a hospital. Like, if a hospital
Hmm.
is willing to sponsor visas, for me, I think that means that they care about their immigrant patients, frankly. Like, I think
Oh,
that,
definitely.
like, when we think about like building a diverse physician workforce,
Hmm.
unfortunately, in the discourse, nationality or country of origin is very rarely included
Hmm.
in how we think about diversity in this sphere. Um, Especially in cities where there are tons of immigrants and like where some hospitals have
Yep.
primarily immigrant patient populations. I think
Hmm.
it's very sad that those hospitals don't sponsor H1Bs where, that for me, that would be a sign that they're committed to matching their patient population in terms of diversity. And we know that in concordance between like patient and provider, especially with
Hmm.
like race and ethnicity, can improve outcome, can improve trust. So I think it's a choice and it's a value of a hospital.
I completely agree. I think that's a very good proxy to see how much we're valued as a workforce, and if they don't value your workforce, how then it needs us to like pay a little bit more attention, like how much they care about their patient.
Yeah,
Not always, the case, but I think it's especially also like if it's a place that we don't feel welcomed, um,
yeah,
it's really hard for us to have enjoyable work life as well.
of course.
Yeah. So I think that definitely that's something that I think we had a lot of discussion on like J1, H1Bs, and I think that there was a lot. I also have heard some conflicting advice on when to reach out, whether to reach out, how much you should feel empowered to reach out. And
Mhm.
I think your take on it is definitely one of the ones that I think even gives me some more certainty. Okay, I feel really good about reaching out, and
Yeah,
obviously don't make this the first thing that you ask, but make sure that you get all the details correct, and it also shows your interest in the program. So I think that's great advice. Thank you so much.
mhm,
Yeah, and I think my next question has something to do with just kind of choosing a program.
mhm,
You have gone through interviews, look at different programs. What are some of the besides, I guess, where you want to live? How was the
mhm.
train like? Um, where do you envision yourself academically or career-wise? What are some of the factors that, in the end, influence your decision choosing which program to go to?
Yeah. Honestly, I went back to the journals where like I was looking at like what brings me joy and
Hmm.
kind of focused my decision making on that in terms of like my like academic decision. I really wanted to work with like an immigrant patient population,
Hmm.
and like I used to work as a medical interpreter before going to medical school, so I that's how what really made me fall in love with medicine is advocating for patients who have immigrated to the U.S. So I really wanted to be in a space where that was my main patient population. It's one of the main reasons why I chose Mount Sinai. More than half of the patients there don't have English as their first language.
Hmm.
Um, and that was one of the pieces. And the other pieces was I wanted a very strong, like innovative psychiatry, neuroscience research program.
Hmm.
So I like looked at, I mean, I don't know how much that's relevant these days, but I looked at NIH funding for neuroscience and kind of looked at like, well, like, yeah, what are the hospitals that have like a very strong like funding in neuroscience, and then literally like looked at like what clinical trials are being done because I'm interested in clinical trial work.
Hmm.
And at the programs I was interested in, I tried to like find which one had like the most clinical trials I would want to like be involved in. And that was a good proxy for um, essentially like the opportunities that I would have available there. I would also look at like specific centers. Like
Hmm.
Mount Sinai has like a center for psychedelic psychiatry, and then a center
Hmm.
for like computational psychiatry, a center for like neuromodulation, a center
Hmm.
for brain connectomics. So it's a very like I think the way that I looked at it is like the fact that there are so many branches of like
Hmm.
niche neuroscience research that was a green flag for me. So that's something that I like looked at in
Hmm.
different places. And then I tried to find the combination of the two. And then again, like emphasizing like where do you want to live? Psychiatry residency is um it's tough, but there is a lot of free time compared to other medical specialties. So um, you do have a good amount of time to enjoy the place you live in. So I
Hmm.
do think it's important to keep in mind, like being in a place that you like, and I've I used to live in New York. I love it, so that was a big component for me as well.
Hmm. And just to double confirm, psychiatry is categorical specialty, right? You match into psychiatry,
Yes.
you go through. Is there any alternative pathway where it's all categorical?
I think it's all categorical because you don't really do a full year of IM. So it's
Mm,
not like derm or opto where you have like a translational year or an entering
gotcha.
year. The number of IM months that you do kind of varies between programs, but it's usually
Hmm.
between 2 and like 5 months. Oh, and
Gotcha.
the
Yeah,
other thing
because,
is,
oh, sorry.
oh, I was just gonna say one thing about like the program is, I wanted exposure to like as much pathology as I could.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of always got this advice that like residency is the time to learn because you're going to be supervised. You can like really like take advantage of that structure
Hmm.
to learn so that once you're in attending, you feel empowered well in whatever space you end up working in. And for me, the like and that's something that was very clear during my interview season where like in New York you really have like a very broad spectrum of psychopathology that you see because
Hmm.
you're in such a vibrant big
Yep.
city. So that was a component of my decision making versus being in a smaller city where like that might feel at times a little bit more um, maybe a little bit less exposure to what New York has to offer.
Hmm.
So that was another.
Gotcha. And how useful is this? I guess when you're in your third and fourth year, I hear a lot about making connections, find your mentor, find your champion. How was
Mhm.
that in the field of psychiatry? Because I know some fields are very niche and very small. So I think what we have heard from like we have a urology
Mm.
incoming PGY1. It's such a small field. There's a lot of like connections you have to make, mentorship that you have to seek out for. So how was that for psychiatry, and how useful was it for you to decide where to go, what future directions, like scientifically or medically, you want to pursue?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I have like a few mentors that I absolutely love that have like honestly become friends at this point. I really like admire them and they've inspired me so much. Many of them
Hmm.
I honestly like met organically throughout events in medical school and um, I I don't think I do a great job at like networking outside of like my regular medical school life. I've met
Hmm.
some students that are like very talented at that and they're able to like have a whole networking panel. That's not really how I go about it. Um,
Hmm.
so, but besides when my interests became a little bit more solidified, they've like crystallized more. For example, like I wanted to do at HMS, you have to do a scholarly project to
Hmm.
graduate where you do like a research project. And I was very interested in the neuroscience of ketamine and ketamine assisted therapy.
Hmm.
So I just went on like the HMS hospital's websites and looked at who was doing ketamine research and ketamine treatment and just started emailing a bunch of people and we would schedule phone calls and then I would tell them about the project I wanted to do and they were all very supportive and then that's how I ended up finding a mentor. So I think like once you have a better sense of what exactly you want to do,
Hmm.
I think people in psychiatry have I've I've yet to meet a psychiatrist that has not been supportive. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's very it's a wonderful community. So people will want to support you and help you, and if they are not in a space where they can do that, they will um,
Hmm.
essentially show you or like connect you with someone else that is.
Hmm. Gotcha. And I think kind of as part of like the last part of our interview, I think I want to go into some advice and retrospection onto your, med school journey or the last 2 years applying. Um, are there any particular moment that you found really challenging when you were applying to psychiatry, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think honestly, like the one of the main challenge was related to visa sponsorship.
Hmm.
Kind of like the idea that it limited my options was something that was very difficult for me.
Hmm.
Um, Especially given that, like, for example, like New York has, I don't know how many, maybe 10 programs in psychiatry, and there's only one hospital system that sponsors H1B.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so the idea that like, well, like if I if I was a domestic student, I could have applied to all four and interviewed it. So that I think mental process was very hard for me, and that
Hmm.
kind of like stretched out into the whole U.S. Really, when you looked at like most
Right.
places, I was disappointed by the number of programs that are willing to sponsor H1Bs, and I think it kind
Hmm.
of felt a little bit invalidating,
Hmm.
given like how much we've worked to get into medical school and choosing a career of service to help local communities. I think that was a particularly hard struggle. But I would like reflecting on it.
Hmm.
The mindset that I like chose to take with regards to visa sponsorship that I talked about, like really seeing it as a proxy for support changed my whole perspective on this,
Yeah.
and seeing it as a proxy for value. Because at the end of the day, if someone is willing to sponsor an H1B, it's whether or not they're willing to pay the extra 5 or 6 grand that it takes and like have the logistical um, pathway to do that.
Hmm.
I thought that as like how committed they are to like recruiting talent that will like match their immigrant patient population. So that kind of like helped rationalize some of the limitations.
Hmm.
But I would reframe it as a strength, honestly.
Hmm.
The fact that we are international students, we bring so much to the table. It allows us to connect with people in a way that's very unique, um, especially with a lot of our patients that have yet to meet people that like look like them or have similar experiences as them in a
Hmm.
space like the hospital. So
Yeah.
I think it's a superpower. I think um, it's a strength to leverage. So
Hmm.
I know that a lot of people go through like I have a lot of mentees that are like in the pre-med stage applying to medical school and they go through similar struggles with regards to how to think about their international student quote unquote
Yep.
identity because it kind of feels
Hmm.
like one. And I would highly recommend like reframing it as a strength
Hmm.
and rethinking sort of the limitations not as something that's limiting you, but just as a way to better understand like what those options are and what the culture at each of those places are.
Yeah.
But whenever it's frustrating, whenever it's hard, like let yourself be frustrated because it is a frustrating situation. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I guess that's kind of like the challenge with one piece of advice.
Yeah, it's cognitive reframing, right? It's we just have to, it's frustrating. We know how bad it is, but I think, as you said, it's serving us as well to like, okay, does this hospital willing to pay the money, have people who are well versed in this to help you navigate through this process? It's such a empowerment that they really want you. Like, once they are willing to do that, you know that they really want to.
For sure. And honestly, like seeing beyond the US as well was also helpful for me. There were times when I like to think of like plan A through Z, where I was like, well, like if something doesn't work out in the US, there are so many countries that would love
Hmm.
to recruit MDs that will value that will value us. So
Yeah.
the world is your oyster.
Hmm. I think definitely on the empowerment side, I think maybe slightly different residency application where, you're screening them just as much they're screening you. Um, but I think for like listener who apply to med school, it might be a little hard to be empowered in that way.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it gets better when you get to residency applications, I promise.
yes, for
Yeah.
sure. I think it
Yeah.
gets a lot better. Just I think the idea, like being able to get the MD, just comes with a lot of stability. There's
Hmm.
so much to be done afterwards.
Yeah.
So it definitely gets better. I would say the hardest step is the medical school admission
Hmm.
step.
Agreed. So I guess I have like one last question for you in terms of looking back. Do you have any advice slash anything you would like to tell yourself um, before you kind of put together your application and go into residency? Anything that you think you did really
Mhm.
well, you want to tell the young you something, or something that you wish you could have done slightly differently? Just kind of the last piece of advice.
Yeah. I think one big piece of advice is keep doing what you love, keep doing what you're interested in, even if it sounds like um, niche or weird to other people. I was very
Hmm.
interested in, I still am, like MDMA assisted psychotherapy
Hmm.
for PTSD. And I was very interested in that like 2, 3 years ago, before it even like made it to the FDA and then got rejected and everything. Um, and at the time when I started talking about it, especially to my non-psychiatry peers, I got a lot of like weird looks at times, like, oh, what is that? Like, why do you want to do that? That sounds weird. Like, that's just like isn't that just a substance? And then lo and behold, like there's so much research now that's like showing us that there's incredible therapeutic potential um, in like psychedelics more broadly, and it's a very, very growing and exciting field of
Hmm.
psychiatry. Many residency programs in hospitals around the country are opening psychedelic research programs and really like looking into those powerful medicines. And I'm proud of myself for like continuing to study and kind of like stick to what I loved at a time when that might not have been general discourse or what people were excited about.
Hmm.
So keep doing what you love and it's going to show.
Agreed. Because I think if we just pursue what's the logical next step, staying within the comfort zone, I think medicine will look very differently, like now, compared to
Yeah,
what we have
for
already
sure.
achieved. There's so many ideas that's, weird and out of the box, that's not conventional, end up being some of the best medicine that we have had. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, also from an application perspective,
mhm.
you can tell when someone is passionate about what they
Oh
do
yeah.
or
Oh, for
when
sure.
they've done it. Just I think it's very like I did a lot of like undergrad interviews for college, and it's I think it's very easy to tell when someone
It's
has
very
done
easy to
something
tell.
to tick the box. And that's why I think it's that's the main piece of advice that I always tell people. And then the other one that I wish I told myself more is don't be too hard on yourself. This is hard. There are going to be moments that are challenging.
Hmm.
There's no perfect road. So when times are hard, don't
Hmm.
like I know I talk about the reframing, but don't immediately go to the reframing. Like let yourself acknowledge that this is
Oh,
tough.
I know you're going to be a great
Take
psychiatrist
however long
already.
you need. Take however long you need to
Yeah.
process the fact that it's hard
Hmm.
and then reframe it. But
Right.
just don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, you're already very ready to be a wonderful psychiatrist. I can already tell.
Well, because I think like at least for me, and I think that's like a tension that a lot of psychiatrists kind of feel over time is um, there's almost an external pressure to like be always mentally well ourselves,
Mhm.
because the fact that we're mental health providers, and I think that's also like something to debunk. Like it's okay to not have
That's
good days. It's okay
that's
for the
always how
road
I felt,
to
you
be
know.
tough.
It's how who's the psychiatrist slash the psychologist of psychiatrists? Like
Yeah.
who takes care of them mentally, psychologically? And it's
Oh
always
yeah.
fascinating. And then because I feel like not that saying I feel like you guys are a big funnel of a lot of other people's complex emotions and complex
Yes.
cognitions, and you somehow like marinate everyone's emotions in your brain, and that cannot be easy.
Yeah, well, I think honestly that's one of the reasons why there's a like quote unquote better work-life balance in psychiatry because I think if
Hmm.
psychiatrists worked were similar to other specialties, we wouldn't be able to do our job.
Hmm.
I think we like
Hmm.
the time outside of work is essential.
Yeah.
And then I and oh, that kind of ties into like looking at residency programs. Ask about therapy, ask about mental health resources. It
Hmm.
is so important, and
Hmm.
you'd be surprised. Programs look at it very differently. Make sure that your program has like a cheap and easy way to connect you to a psychotherapist from day one.
Mm.
Um, some programs will have like $5 therapy session. You could do like two a week if you want to,
Mm.
where like you can essentially like do like long lasting, like intense like psychotherapy
Hmm.
and at a very affordable price. So like
Mm.
that's also something else. I think psychiatrists we're very acutely aware of the fact that like we need to process. So
Mm.
if
Yeah.
yeah, that's something to look for.
Yeah, because I think I remember that when I was on medicine rotation at Brigham, because they have specific psychiatrist or psychologist in the hospital for residents. Like you can just
Yes,
drop in and like, hey, I want to talk about something. So I think that's very
yes.
important too. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think this is super insightful, and I think this now has become something that we can perpetuate on our website so that people can all benefit from it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and really appreciate it. And good luck in New York and all the wonderful things you're gonna do, because I already know you're gonna be great. So keep us updated with any exciting things that you're up to, and you know, we're here as all the international students. We're a community. We support each other, and thank you for all you do for F1 doctors.
Thank you so much for organizing this, and thank you for all you do. This is an incredible organization. I'm so happy that you're continuing to do this.
Yeah, because I feel like we all each of us just kind of. I'm gonna stop the recording